So over the last month, I've reached out to a few hundred, here's the criteria, a few hundred B2B, mostly manufacturing, mostly US based, all over 50 million a year companies to talk about sales and marketing alignment. Like I partnered with Databox and we have this survey. I think there's been 120 people that have done it so far. And the survey is basically to help identify, is sales and marketing alignment important? Yes, we know. But surprisingly, not everybody says yes. What is working and what isn't working from a multiple questions point of view, and then like an area to share. I'm surprised by how much effort and energy small, like these small consultancy gurus and stuff on LinkedIn, I obviously am not a fan, macro speaking, but I am really impressed with how processized and like all of the motions have come to for someone else to replicate it, but how far away, which is a complex system and it's worth like sharing it, especially if it works. But then on the other extreme, all of these companies that are in business and have these systems, how unwilling they are to even experiment when they're like the ones that have the most to gain and the least risk. You know, I know spending 20, 40, 50, 100, $200,000 can be scary. And there's obviously pedestals to sales and marketing changes, but that has been probably the most surprising takeaway I've had in this last month. It seems like the more complex the organization, the larger and more established, the less modern their sales practices and marketing practices are. And I am going to keep asking people for information until I think I figure out what it is, other than don't fix it unless it's broke.
Well, and I think that there's like a gap and they don't see that it's even broke or getting broken. There's a traditional way that, you know, we've run businesses siloed for many, many years. And, you know, as long as revenue is being generated, what does it matter? And I think what the missing there is like the amount of other opportunity that you're missing out on because you're not aligned is huge. That's my 2 cents on it. And, you know, and you touched on something there, I think, where you said you got to experiment. And I think people are or businesses and people in general are afraid to experiment. They're afraid to fail because it is costly. You know, if you're putting dollars behind it and it fails, they might not be looking at, well, what did you learn from that? They're just looking at the lost revenue, you know? So I think that there's some correlation between the two.
This, as you were saying that, it also makes me remind me that when you're in a job and you've been there for any amount of time, especially with all the news about like inflation and just all the macroeconomic stuff that's happening, the idea of trying something and failing in most company cultures, especially ones that aren't willing to try new things, is, well, you're now on the chopping block. I forget that that's such a reality, and it's definitely a hard reality to overcome. Or it's like, hey, sorry, we got to stick here and here because if I wiggle or weave outside of this path, it's execution time on the job. You know, like they'll just terminate me, and that's disappointing to hear too. There's so many fun things. I say fun, but because I love this stuff. But there are really so many unique tools and functions that weren't available 2, 5, 10, 15 years ago that add so much value into the relationship. Like whether you're selling snow blowers to local governments or whatever. So part of it's like, how do we get people excited about doing the difficult thing, which is change, tied into, we know you literally cannot grow without changing because it's science. So we got to like hype people up. I feel like, how do we do that with sales and marketing alignment and new software? I guess I don't have the answer yet.
Well, I think it's like you said, it's changed drastically. The availability for the information to make those decisions, you can get a lot easier now. You know, I was rewatching Mad Men, and there's this scene where Don Draper is talking to a client and they're a steel manufacturer, and steel is a commodity, but they don't want it to be seen as a commodity because it's an expensive commodity. And they presented 3 different ads. And at the end of it, it was basically the client saying like, it feels like I'm promoting the city because it was like Chicago, San Francisco, and so on. It was 3 different cities. And the premise behind the ad was like, these cities were built by Bethlehem Steel. It was a really great concept. But what was missing for the client was like some of the visuals and blah, blah, blah. And then what they end up landing on at the end is like Bethlehem is steel is the backbone of America. Now, those 3 concepts took 3 months to do. And back then with all the amount of research and the focus groups and everything. So I think like what I'm trying to get to is that time to action, is that you can now, if you got like HubSpot or Apollo, you can see the actions happening immediately. So you need to be able to adapt quickly and understand like, hey, is this a pivot moment or not? And are we still aligned across the board? That was a very roundabout way of saying something, but
I mean, some of us see that opportunity and get excited about it, because the idea of having to pitch Bethlehem Steel and having to take 3 months to bring an idea together, and not having to do that anymore is like so fantastic. Especially when there's just so many, when the Mad Men team is pitching the client, you never know what their life and experience is, and you have to deal with that filter regardless. Doesn't make it any easier, well, it might make it a little bit harder, because then you got to go back to the drawing board, literally, because you don't have computers. And that's probably why yesterday, Yamini, the CEO of HubSpot, made a really cool, interesting post about AI. And so since we're talking a little bit about sales and marketing alignment and software, I think AI is very relative. So I'm going to paraphrase. I'm so sorry, Yamini. I'm going to paraphrase what she said. But essentially, this was a light case study into how a company, HubSpot, is using AI to be a better company. So, but it's spelled out in a very digestible way. And I think this is, when I read it, I was like, okay, I need to find a way to tie these stories into our conversations with larger companies. So let me just talk about it. Okay, so she's basically saying, we want to show you one way we've used AI. And one of the ways is they deployed it inside their website and support chat. Obviously, knowing that it's not going to be perfect, especially when you start. So acknowledging that and having a plan for when things fall off the rails. So she acknowledges it's not going to be perfect. Even our plan to make it as perfect as possible is going to fail. So let's go into it, meet that with some amount of grace and maybe even excitement, because you're going to learn some things. But without that aside, their chatbot is now digitally resolving 30% of the incoming service tickets. And then I realized that HubSpot is an extreme example. And she doesn't list the number of tickets and what 30% is. But I can tell you from my perspective, as far as it being a HubSpot partner dealing with 100 clients a day, maybe we'll send one for every 4 customers per day. So that's 25. I think there's let's say there's 250,000 HubSpot customers. So let's say they field 50 to 70,000 messages a day. And let's say that number is fairly accurate, and 30% of that we'll say is 20,000, right? So
yeah, somewhere around there.
Between 50 and 70 is 60. So that's 20,000. So 20,000 a day, tie that to, I don't know, it's a lot of tickets. And if one person can resolve 100 tickets a day, which is a lot, you're going to need a lot of people to service those tickets. And humans, as much as I hate to say this, we do make mistakes. So
you do.
So there's arguably a X factor for even having human deployment in service anyway. So to be transparent, to show how HubSpot is using similar software and evolving and adapting in real time, for me, was just one of the reasons I was refreshed in being in this universe. They're not afraid to make mistakes. They're not afraid to be transparent about mistakes, but they're also saying, here's a real life example. We are a $1 billion+ company, and we had to try and experiment with a tool, which has taken all year. But now we're saving money on team members, and that's a nice plus for your board. But people are able to use the website and get the right information without having to interact with a human almost 1/3 of the time. That's very empowering for the customers of HubSpot to not have that human delay. And I wish there were more people that were sharing those types of stories. And that I said that out loud, and it's recorded. I am going to find and more of these stories. Thanks, Yamini, for inspiring me with your LinkedIn post.
Yeah, I think
Inspiration strikes in weird places.
that's a great one too. I mean, I definitely want to be careful on that bit of we can replace some humans on that. What I would say is like we can put them into more productive roles now rather than sitting on a support chat. Maybe move those support people over to CSM positions where they can help clients do better, right? So I think that there's some opportunity there. I really like what HubSpot's doing with the AI side. I don't know, but the 30%, that's pretty astounding.
Yeah, that's a lot of tickets. 83% of the chat on HubSpot's website is AI managed, and the chatbot digitally resolves about 30% of incoming tickets. So it's a huge gain in productivity. The customer reps have more time to focus on the complex, high-touch questions. So, like to your point, they're not just saying, "Hey, look, we cannibalized 30% of the team," and they're saying now the team members can actually be more available for the conversations where AI really isn't a fit to help.
Yeah.
AI has not just transformed their customer service; it's elevated it. So here's
Yeah.
what she learned, because she shares that. That's like my big takeaway. Don't panic if customer experience gets worse initially. It will improve as your data evolves. And I'll speak to that in a second. Evolve your KPIs and how you measure success. If AI resolves typical questions and your team resolves tricky ones, they will need more time. Use AI to elevate your team efforts. Again, I think the acknowledgement of when you change, it usually gets worse before it gets better. Just like the acknowledgement of taking one step back to take one giant leap forward is kind of nice to hear.
Yeah, I mean that it sits in the same realm of like even on personal development. So anytime that you've got a breakthrough in who you are personally, professionally, whatever, there's always a dip. You have to go through this dip. You gotta, when you're gonna make an experience change as a business or as a human being, there's gonna be people that don't like what you're changing into because they haven't seen the end result yet. And in a business, they haven't seen what the end product is yet. They've just seen the beginning. So there's always going to be that dip. You just kind of got to weather the storm and get ready for that big tidal wave. And then you're going to come back out of it on the other end, provided, you listen at the same time.
It reminds me of the classic, like, Henry Ford quote. If I asked them what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's a great one.
Yeah. Exactly.
And it's true. It doesn't make it any more trickier. Like, how do you sell, hey, we want you to see this new feature, but it's going to cost some money. Some people are going to be upset because they're going to have to do some things differently and outside of their normal day. And we know that they have a whole life outside of work that they care about and they don't want to negatively impact, but there's going to be an impact there. I haven't found the science on how to do that other than data consistency and then respecting the fact that this may take some time to digest and giving them the power to dive deeper and figure out when it's the right time.
Yeah, I mean, looking back to my days on software development and releasing products, I look at it as like, as you're introducing a new feature, you don't give it to everybody on day one. You do a small subset. How are people interacting with it? Are they even using it? And you collect that feedback, you get that data. Okay, they're working with it. They're either frustrated or they're not. The experience is good. That's why the NPS surveys are a great tool for that. And then you slowly start releasing it out to more and more until eventually it's been done. It's just like whenever Facebook changes its UI and HubSpot changes its UI, there's always somebody that's going to say, I hate this. It's so clunky, but it's because they've gotten into their routine. But once you get using it, it's like, okay, I can understand why they made these changes. I can understand this is actually going to make me more productive. If it's being done for the right reasons and not just because somebody on the product team is like, hey, this would be really cool, then I think it makes more sense. I think
that's a really good point. So I was on a panel on ABM. What was this guy's name? Earlier this week it's a recorded session for Hub X OS, which is like a HubSpot centric operational online forum. Feel free to check it out. But I was asked to present, and it's a panel with myself. I believe his name's Robert, but I'm unsure of his last name. He's like a 20-year consultant. He's in the UK, and he's spent the last 10 years really talking about ABM. And it was really fun because admittedly very self-taught, although I have like a lot of data to draw from and a lot of impact of actually using it thanks to owning a company, not being an individual consultant. But it was a very fun experience for me because I had someone who was very willing to disagree with me. And that was such a fun experiment because it was his very classic way of looking at ABM, which I have agreements with, but don't agree the whole argument because of technology. Companies, highly targeted, handful of accounts, 10, 20, 50, 100. That's ABM. You're spending a lot of time and energy. They can be your current customers or they can be net new customers, but you're finding those real key people. You're making an active effort to really talk to them and work with them. And it's not scraping lists from Apollo and sending email outreaches, which is a super powerful form of ABM, but one very hard to sell the strategy and the effort behind. So growth created what is called, I call it growth ABM, and now other people are too. And that's that still one to few. It's that middle ground between one to few and one to many. And meaning you're capped based on, which to me is going to be a logical cap. You are capped based off of a capacity by person in the program. There's technical limits to the outreach you can do, and that should be your max capacity. And you can scale this down. And this is the growth. Growth ABM is the ABM plan I talk about the most. So you do this wonderful sales and marketing alignment meeting. Everybody's kumbayaing. We've found the cool details that no one's thought to shared that may not be in the database yet. We realize there's a couple of industries that we would really like to target, and we have a sales team. And so we're going to let each person represent one niche so they can be hyper dedicated to that universe, looking at trade shows and information and just other things so they can organically give a shit about the conversation, and they can lean on this sales and marketing workshop to find the language to talk about the problems and the interest that may spark the conversations necessary. Him and I greatly disagreed around what you call that, which he called it demand gen. I said, sure, that's fine. Why is it not account-based marketing? Honestly, I didn't get really like a straightforward rebuttal other than it's too many people, which I said categorically, a rose is a rose, my man. You're using the same tactics, but you're able to leverage technology to expand that same amount of personalization that 10 years ago required all this effort. And now you can just do it to a few more people and do it authentically. You have to be a lot more nuanced with how you're speaking and put the time in so you're respecting the other people's side of the fence. But it's cool. I'm excited for that to go live and to have more people hear it. And ABM is still like, we looked at the Google Trends, right? ABM, growth operations, these two terms continue to grow, and it makes perfect sense to me. And I love a logical conclusion that there's so many companies and so many people, it's really hard to innovate a creative new thing other than just taking the time and making sure the message is flashed. It's a lot.
Yeah. And I'll throw my 2 cents in and you can say, no, Rich, you're wrong. I'm cool with that. Like demand gen to me is I'm going to spray out on a bunch of channels and hope that something's going to come back to me. I'm going to generate that demand. And I got to have a killer product. I've got to have killer copy. I've got to be very creative. I'm not saying that ABM doesn't have those facets, but what I see as ABM is you have an opportunity to touch and provide value to different levels within an organization for an account that you want to have. So let's say growth wants to sign Red Bull or Uber, for instance. I know Uber's like in your mind somewhere, so that's why I'm going to use that. Now, ABM, we're going to target people within different departments, within different roles, with relevant content to solve the problem for their role and bring them in. And is that contextually accurate?
I think so. I mean, with the demand gen, you're still targeting messaging in the same way that a billboard targets messaging. Like, you did place a billboard on a highway, so technically you targeted the people that are on the highway, right? That's okay.
Technically, yeah.
I see ABM as if you can take whatever message you want and you can tailor it for a person based off of where they work and what they do. That is one piece, but that is the core DNA piece of ABM. And before you could do like what Nick Z would say from air traffic control, where you're getting printed list of people's and fax numbers, and you're sending pizzas and that craziness. Like, oh my God.
That's a great idea.
I wish people had the hustle that Nick had back in like, what was it, 2005 or whatever. He was doing that. But because we have tools and software now, you can send more faxes. It's still a relevant relationship. Just because the time you spent was fractionally less doesn't make it any more or less authentic. As long as you put in that time for there to be authenticity. We all get a bunch of spam that isn't authentic, and that sucks. But that doesn't mean good outreach sucks. It just means that outreach wasn't good.
So would it be safe to say then we've got the billboard on the highway that might have some of these people driving on it, and then versus the billboard outside of Uber's office?
I think that's okay. That's interesting. The problem is with the billboard is that you can't guarantee people will look at it. Whereas with ABM, I guess maybe technically you can't guarantee it either.
You can guarantee a subset, but yeah,
maybe that is similar. I mean, maybe ABM is more like being able to phone call, text, email, and drop ads to the people inside the Uber office on their computer and on their cell phone, and do it forever or until your budget runs out.
Because I'm getting it. Like I'm seeing.
What a tough company to sell into, though. To be completely honest, like
it would be
that's a tough one.
Tough. Yeah. Let's just start throwing ad. Like I don't know if you've seen some of these Ubers where they've got like Uber ads now inside of the cars.
I saw it for the first time. Taking an Uber from the airport in Monterey, coming back from inbound, and I was telling Katrina like, "Oh, that was so fun," but like, I don't want to see the color orange for like the weekend. I'm so glad I'm home. And then we hop in the Uber, and they just launched the Uber ads, and it was like, HubSpot centric. I was reinvigorated. I thought it was great.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, but I was like, I can't wait to not see that again. Like, hey, it's here. I can't help it.
It's prime
brand guy.
Yeah.
I'm in the mix.
Oh, I get it. I think maybe that's pretty cool.
That's the trick, though, I guess, maybe, is just like consistent messaging and being available as people look around is the way to sell into these accounts. I don't know.
There's plenty of channels, not challenge. Well, there's challenges too, but channels, in my opinion, that ABM can encompass too, right? Podcast being one of them. We've seen some stuff come out of this. I look back to a campaign that Calgary, where I live, ran to when Amazon was looking for warehouses across Canada, and there was a bidding war between Calgary and Edmonton. And what Calgary did is they went and found out all the hotels that the Amazon executives were staying at, and they put decals on the sidewalk outside the hotels all the way to like the lights and everywhere, where it's like, Calgary's this way. And I'm like, that was like some genius guerrilla marketing style, but yeah, like that can even work too. But yeah,
I mean, again, like I'm just a guy. I don't know what someone called a thing once and then that becomes the rule. But to me, that could definitely be a hands-on ABM play. I mean, that's the account, right? So, and it would be exciting to be in a universe where I get the opportunity, or we get the opportunity to play in all these kind of like unique, funky, how do we make it different and cool? But we're really in the business of like, how do we make something scalable? How do we create change so a company can grow? And then how can we do something that's able to be tested, expanded, and replicated consistently? So it's fun as a different kind of challenge. And I've been picking my brain with like, how do we make the first few steps of ABM a little bit more digestible? Because it is a big lift, and I talk about that all the time. ABM requires a bunch of software, requires a bunch of time, requires a lot of background knowledge. So like, really isn't for startups, and it really is for companies that like sell expensive things to companies that need expensive things. And even though all of the case studies, all the information, all of the accuracy we have around it, it's still a big ask. especially for these companies that are a little bit more reluctant to change. What's the baseline thing that's exciting about ABM? Is it the list of companies we could sell to? I wonder if maybe that's the free opener. Like, hey, click here and we'll show you 50 key accounts that we can help you sell to. And then maybe that is like requires a conversation, a form being filled out with certain information. Then we can go just like fuzz everything out and then take a subsect and be like, are these the people that you want to sell to? And they're like, oh shit, that's Bob, blah, blah, blah. Like, yeah, I've been trying to get a hold of him for 3 years. Okay, great.
Yeah.
We can do that. Then I had this crazy idea, probably late at night, maybe after a couple of margaritas, where the next thing is like, can I prove to you that I can talk to Bob? Is that what you're worried about? Is the worry that I can actually get Bob to talk to me? And they're like, yeah. They're like, all right, cool. I will bet the price of our service on it. And if I can get him to communicate with me in less than a week, full price. If it takes me 2 weeks, you get a 5% discount. If it takes me a month, you get a 10% discount. I have a sneaky suspicion that if I contacted this Bob person and said, hey, I sell this service where I get people, you and blah, 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 I feel like if I was authentic with my outreach, Bob would respond to me quickly. And then that proof of maybe that would be a hurdle that would help us overcome this like skepticism of like, is this real? It's not a crystal ball. There's a lot of work behind it. It isn't cheap. Yeah, I know that doesn't make something real, but maybe that would be a fun experiment for the companies that are reluctant. Like if you are hearing ABM, I want to do it, I just don't get it, or my boss doesn't get it. My question for you is if I can provide, based off of some feedback from you, a list of companies based off of the feedback, and you could cherry pick any person at any company relative to the conversation for me to communicate with that person and prove it, that you would move forward. Because then the core of my argument for ABM is now anybody can talk to anybody as long as it's worth talking to. What do you think? Like, it's the first time I've shared that with you. Is that the world's dumbest idea?
It's not the first time you've shared it with me in that way.
First time I remember. Okay.
In that way. Because we do have a page on Growth's website that is about building that target account list. So I think that's like phase 1. Not worded in the way that you just worded it. So I think
classic Chris.
Opportunity to split test that and see how it goes. Marketing ops hat on now. You've had crazier ideas where you've waived entire fees as well. So I'm not shocked that Chris,
but price doesn't seem to be
6
the obstacle.
Margaritas deep. Yeah, I think it's like the trust thing. I think trust and time to act. Like, how long is this actually going to take? Is it going to be ROI positive for me? And if it works, I know people have no problem paying for it. And we know it works. So I think we just need to get people lined up at the door for it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't mind having people know that it's a challenge to prove to them how this works, despite having multiple clients be like, yeah, the impossible happened and it keeps happening. And I went out on vacation for 2 weeks and all the deals kept rolling in. Didn't require me to do anything because Growth handled all of it. It still seems crazy. Yeah, I don't know how to do it. Maybe I need to find like a cool LinkedIn post where I don't know. I wouldn't even know how to format that stuff. I just don't communicate in that kind of communication structure. But then it's curious because I still love this ABM stuff. I think it's crazy.
Oh, it's great. Just in the amount that I have relearned since joining Growth, there's a huge opportunity, and I think that there's some ways to get really creative with it. Gifting strategies, pizza boxes, like Nick said. I don't know.
I mean, the pizza box. Who doesn't like a pizza? That would be an interesting.
Celiacs.
Maybe we should just get more aggressive with our own ABMing.
That is definitely what we need to do, and we're doing it. We're in that process right now. I think too, it's just like, let's get more creative. And I think like you mentioned earlier, just in our little kind of chat, it was like marketing ops versus creative marketing. What were you thinking about there?
I think one of the takeaways I have on this part of my journey is a different understanding of what a marketing professional is. And I think I have found that there's like 2 different sides of the marketing force, right? And neither one is light or dark, but they're just for differences. Let's say the light is the marketing ops, and that is the systems, the buttons and knobs of allowing you to have a marketing tool, especially like software based marketing, so you can see what's working and what's not, right? But just running an first of all, just running an ad without any creative insights and keeping it like very baseline is almost always going to be way better than doing nothing. So marketing ops is a thing, and you may not need the other person that I'm going to describe. The other person I'm describing, that we'll call the dark side, is the creative marketer. And this is the person that understands the customer, understands people and psychology, and is kind of driven to hit the right message at the right time. You know, I am seeing that when you, especially like, yeah, you and I are a good example, but just in general, I've just been talking to so many marketing executives. I don't know if anyone is being forward enough with the fact that there are two halves of this marketing brain, and not a lot of people have both, and that's okay. But when you put them together, it really can create a lot of magic, giving you the. I've never really been a systems person. I've been a kick the door down person.
I know.
And like you said, like you've already said this, I was like, oh, did I? Doesn't work, rip it down and start fresh. So having marketing operations help you prevent that, because maybe 85% of the system is fine. You just got to zhuzh a couple of pieces and you don't have to start from scratch this way. So it's just, I'm going to make a more concerted effort to try to identify which one someone is. And I think that may help me better extract, like maybe sales and marketing alignment works better with marketing ops people than it does with creative marketers, or vice versa. I don't know. I haven't split the hair that way yet.
You know, I agree. There's got to be a distinction between the two sides, because from the ops side, you're looking at the how-to, you're looking at the frameworks, right? And the creative side, in my mind, is knowing the right elements to fulfill the how-to, right? So there's this. I was rereading a book I've read a couple times, and in that book, he says, "Don't get caught up in the frameworks, because the frameworks themselves can't sell anything without having transferred the right elements into them." So if you understand the mechanisms and how to work those mechanisms, that's one part, and I think that's your marketing ops person. But the creative needs to know the gut punch that the audience needs and bring those elements into whatever the mechanisms are. That makes sense.
It does make sense. It's hard to like, that's part of the exploration process with like our creative marketing. To bring the creative marketer into a system like ABM, we use that sales and marketing alignment to essentially give us the warehouse of information, the tribal knowledge that we can process out of to draw the communication that we want to, and ads and offerings and things that we really want to share. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I mean, you got to have a little sizzle, because you have however you're sending your message, it has to land to drive action.
Yeah. I like that.
Just having the system in place doesn't always quite do it.
No, and you know, I go back to the thing you said, like running an ad that is very basic is better than nothing at all. I wholeheartedly agree, because if you're not taking any action, you're not going to get anything out on the other end. And maybe that non-pretty ad is going to feed the operational side of it just enough to know where you need to tweak it and improve it. And then you can just continue to iterate that creative over time. I think that's, where that lies there, because honestly, if you're not doing anything, nobody's going to see you. And it doesn't matter what system you have in place. You could have the best systems. So I think that's, where you and I play well together, is you've got that creative side. I've got the system side, and we can both think creatively and we can both think systematically, but we respect each other's positions and point of views, that it becomes a compliment.
Yeah. And hopefully we just keep doing more and more of that. When I was talking to, Katrina from Growth about the sales and marketing data I've been getting from the interviews and everything, she had a fun moment, and she described it just like, we're talking about essentially the same thing as departmental alignment and how important that is. She then kind of caveated to her own definition of growth operations, and growth operations being that defined, intentful oversight of creating the departmental alignment. So that way there is sales and marketing and service, and they're working as one organization, really, not pretend doing it, really doing it. And she feels that from her experience, the way that we talk about this sales and marketing alignment, we're putting so much energy into it. There's going to be a lot of things that we can scale and use for like, okay, well, let's get service and marketing alignment. Let's get service and sales alignment. Let's get service, marketing, sales alignment, and operational alignment. Let's get all these people in a room all the time. Not all the time, but more often than never.
Yeah.
And that way we're truly all headed in the same direction. Because she deals so much with the customers, like a bunch of industries, bunch of company sizes, but she is kind of boots on the ground in that universe. It was really refreshing to see at least that there's a chance that the effort and energy we're putting into the sales and marketing alignment conversation is applicable to other areas as well. And I just wouldn't have put two and two together that way.
Yeah. And I think that third piece in that alignment is really important, the service side, because that allows a business to actually expand its footprint into its customer base, increase lifetime value, and monitor the relationship kind of going forward to feed that information back to marketing and sales too, so that those areas all improve. So, the flywheel is great if we can cover all those three aspects, and that gives you an opportunity to continuously improve at every level.
Yeah, I think that's, it seems so obvious, but it's still the real struggle with organizations, accepting that in order to grow, they have to change. It's tough. And that's I guess our challenge is just making it more digestible around the relationship. You can't just say, well, if I get HubSpot or Salesforce or Marketo or insert any software here, what's my ROI? Because there's so much tangible and intangible elements around that. Not always my problem to solve, but
if you can solve that challenge, then that's great.
Oh my God. It's a unfully resolvable issue. Unfortunately, I think that's just the reality of things. But it does seem like more and more as we've evolved, and I've been doing more and more market research with DataBox, it's been surprising to me how human inflection points, and like at what point change happens, and the uncomfortability around helping facilitate communication at companies. No software is going to solve those problems. And I don't want to dabble into another business venture, but it almost seems that like someone needs to be helping these companies with like culture change, like mindset change, and like gets into like a fixed mindset versus growth mindset sort of situation. And again, I'm not a psychologist, have no intention on being, but the growing a business is difficult. And I wonder if maybe that kind of methodology would be valuable to some, kind of like getting out of the weeds and nuances of the work itself, and then maybe take a step back around the mental framework of how to start looking at some of these things outside of a dollars and cents, or like many things. Maybe I'm just crazy. I've had 0 margaritas, so today so far, it's only 1 o'clock.
Oh, that's a good start. No, you know what? There's a conversation. I'm going to introduce you to this guy. He started off as like a brand guy, but he really comes in and looks at an organization from that culture, mission, values point of view, and helps transform the mindset of those individuals. Yeah, just a nice, interesting conversation, I think, and another perspective that is outside the world that we typically deal in. I don't know.
Sounds like definitely got to get on the show.
Yeah, I think so. He's got a great Jedi beard too, so he'd just fit in perfectly.
Clutch, nice. So like, I love a good hairy dude.
Oh, that's awesome. What else you want to talk about today? I don't know. Going to Inbound in a couple weeks-ish.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Growth has grown so much in 3 years, and it's so crazy to go from like the intrepidation of 2022, and like seeing you, seeing Kyle Jepson, Paul Sullivan, who's the one that hosts this Hub XOS thing I had mentioned earlier, right? And like really feeling like I know a lot of stuff, but I don't know anything about this stuff, to 2 years later bringing 7 people from growth, 2 of our core clients, one of which is just like an insanely amazing company from Africa, and an old client that, not old and like they are old and like it's just been a while since we've worked together, but so excited to see them and stepping into this like with just like a whole different energy where it's just more like I feel like I'm going to be more of a tour guide than an attendee, which I'm excited for.
You love being a tour guide.
I don't hate it. I
you're a great
people
tour
having
guide.
a very good time and at work or at play or visiting offices in Monterey or hanging out in Big Sur. Oh, shameless plug. Yeah, just like I love life so much. It is really enjoyable to like find ways to make people's day, life, conference more enjoyable. I almost would rather just do that than any of the work stuff that's required. Like I got to go to a couple of meetings and stuff like that. Like I'm there, but they're going to get the conversational Chris, because I think that's the mindset I'm in when I'm there, is meeting people, and I don't have a hidden agenda, period. Right. So it's like sell stuff. If you're interested in that stuff, great. We can talk about it, or we definitely don't have to if that makes you uncomfortable. I'm totally fine with not creating a passive sale and just offering to help, which I still think is so funny. Like so many people are just like, yeah, right. Okay. Well, let me know when you take me up on it.
Hey, that's what birthed this relationship, was just a general desire to share without anything coming back to it, right?
I'm going to keep that energy going. It's helped me get to where I am today, and I know I wouldn't be able to say the things that I say now if people hadn't helped open the door, stick their foot in for me to sneak in, giving me the time of day even to just hear me talk. And I'm sure in hindsight, thinking about some of those conversations, there are times where probably people were like, this guy is nuts, but I appreciate his enthusiasm. So it's not the head.
I don't think that ever crossed my mind. The nuts part anyways.
Well, good. Thank goodness. I try to base most things in quasi-rational thought.
Yeah.
Not always.
No, it's good. And so you're gearing up for this, are you setting any expectations for yourself and how you want this to go? Like in marketing conferences in general, how do you typically prepare?
Yeah. I don't know if I have it typically. How I'm preparing this year is there's some core objectives for growth, and not shockingly, it is to meet more like-minded people in our universe of the HubSpot and the softwares. I'm excited. There's a couple of software that I haven't worked with, but CMS. I'm excited to meet with them. Aircall. I'm excited to meet with them. Hopefully I'll get a little bit more time with Rollworks. So I think those are, I guess I slipped into why I'm going, but for the company, I want our team members all in different roles. So Katrina in service, Amy's a developer, former HubSpotter, Jason. I want them to meet more people in their universe. So they have, like Daniel had mentioned in a previous recording, their own advisory council to help them grow as a person, make some new friends. I feel like this universe is a lot easier when you do have someone to talk to and vent with.
Yeah.
We're so spaced by distance and we're still a small company. It's not like you can really go and water cooler vent with many people at growth, because they're either your boss or they work for you. So helping people have the space to find ways to have work talk outside of their individual company, I think is helpful.
Yeah.
And I am just so proud of the work we've done and the team, giving them a chance. It is a little bit of a chance to show them off in a way of look how far we've come. Look how the caliber of people that are at growth now are just some of the smartest minds I've ever worked with. We had an internal meeting we're doing a real funky project that's Salesforce commerce website with a bunch of sorry guys, janky code on top of it, with another system. Talk about cobbled, huge company too. Tens of billions, practically worldwide, maybe not Antarctica, but like very widespread stuff. And we had Brad, so Salesforce developer based in New Zealand. I think Amy was running point. She's based in Boulder. Nathan, who's joined our team as director of website services, hailing from North Carolina, and then like little old me just fielding these conversations. And it was after about 30 minutes, I just had to like not like kind of quasi interrupt and say, I think this is the most complex solution solving conversation I've ever been in my career. And I was like, for me, it was just like a very like proud dad moment. I was like, I hope we're all aware there's not much I can contribute to this, but I will help make space for everybody. Oddly enough, engineers, which most of these three can be described as, have a way that their brain works. And I was raised by a nuclear engineer, naval officer. So I'm familiar that sometimes, whereas I can almost always see multiple ways of doing something, a lot of people in engineering only see one way. And when that way is blocked, it is a full system shutdown, which is where I get my kick the door down phrase. So I think there may have been a moment I may have just like conjured in my mind of like, hey, look, I helped kick a door down. Maybe they didn't lead me, but it felt like I did. So that was nice.
Well, I mean, you're responsible for putting them in the room, right? So there's got to be
I'll
some
take
credit
whatever
there.
pats on the back I can get, Rich. Thank you very much. I agree with you.
Yeah,
but like that, I'm fine. I would have never thought one of my proudest moments would be hearing people talk about a work thing, but
it's
was
weird.
really refreshing. I can share a weird yesteryear story. So I had a business partner a long time ago for a lot of years. I haven't thought about this story and we still have the same office then as I have now in Orlando, Florida that you recently went to.
Yeah.
And now I remember in my mid-20s when this company was rolling, we were doing some dollars, expressing a vision where we had these people working in office and solving problems, and just the lack of that is not how I want to do things from my business partner at the time was so heartbreaking that I think that's what I experienced in that meeting I previously described was like, oh my God, this is a real thing. This is the right way to solve complex problems. He had come from a universe where relationships were very transactional in nature, maybe with like stock brokering or something, but it was very much like you sign here, you get XYZ. And that's just like creating relationships and things was not part of his acumen. And he really didn't agree with that being important at all. I'm not sure what industry he's in now, but I'm still here. So I didn't go anywhere. I feel like maybe that was why that was such a cool moment.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it and I go, the CEO's role is to steer the ship and find the right people to move the ship in that direction. So I think you've done a great job of getting the right people in place so that those conversations can happen. And the other thing that I like to, this isn't kind of blow smoke up Chris's ass moment, but it's just,
I'll take
it. You're not one to sit and wait to take the action, right? If you didn't have that team in the room, I can guarantee that you would probably have 600 to 600 people that you can reach out to that can help you get the right people in the room. And you're not going to wait to do that. And I think that that's very admirable. Just like in our conversation with team yesterday, where it's like, I'd like you to to take that action before you have to be told to take that action, like be proactive about it. I think that's a very important trait from any level of leadership. And just like in our conversation last night when we were dealing with something, it was like, hey, this is where that's at. And how quickly you took action on that. That was top notch.
Thanks, man. I think it's one of the things I'm finding really refreshing about this team is the openness, the communicating, the not intensity, but the sense of urgency around facilitating communication and the responsibility taken that when you need to collaborate with somebody, saying you need to collaborate with them on somebody doesn't alleviate you of the responsibility of getting it done. All you did was tap into a resource. It's still your responsibility to ensure the completion of said task in whatever relationship that is. And I think that is something I've learned over time, and I try to be aware of, and hopefully that we're seeing at growth that I am like being the cause. So much of my like foundational rugby career was like a captain coach situation. So you had to really be the best to lead the best. And I've been involved with leadership since I was like 6 years old. But I think that's probably my favorite 2 or 3 year period, just because like the responsibility you have to bear, and that is so similar to a CEO of a small company. Like I put so much responsibility on myself every day to be my best. So that way I'm not failing you all or the customers. Like I want to be sharp and present, and neutral in most cases, to be that guide and leadership figure. And I'm still, there's like, when do you get to call yourself a CEO? I think I'm just starting to get there. I'm still in the work, but maybe like 5 to 10% of my week is truly in the work, as opposed to 100% in the work, which is taking some getting used to as well.
Yeah. Titles are, I don't know. Titles are goofy to me in some instances, the CEO of one.
Oh my God. I mean, I had a business card when I was 20 years old where it was like C period E period O, no period. And like, it was like a cool website thing to do. It did end up becoming a thing and did end up having an office and employees and things. But to see like, okay, I call myself in my early 20s a kid, and like I apologize for anybody that listens to this and is like, hey, I'm in my 20s, I'm not a kid. Sure, you're not. But to see like fully actualized adults that have been like forcefully retired from a career become a guru and then put CEO on their thing, it's really quite frustrating to engage with someone who's rusing as a business owner, with the responsibilities that come with it, that then come with like the weight of changing decisions and being able to speak to a thing accurately, and disguising that as like that being you when it's not. That grinds my gears. I get it though. Like it's exciting.
There's one that grinds my gears, and Queenie and I talk about this all. Entrepreneur versus business owner.
Cool. I haven't had that conversation.
Yeah. So a lot of people that we know that start their own businesses go on to say that they're an entrepreneur. But in our mind, an entrepreneur is somebody that has built multiple successful businesses with an intent to exit the business. Ultimately, if there is no intent to ever exit a business, then it's not a business. It's kind of like where we draw that line. I mean, there's points of legacy and things like that, but an entrepreneur is somebody that is a serial person that will create, launch, build, and exit. Whereas a business owner is somebody who just owns a business. There's a third tier in there where it's like, well, you're not really either an entrepreneur or business owner. You've just kind of created a job for yourself. Because I've taken on 10 clients. That's one that kind of always gets to me. And I remember I used to sit in like BNI and stuff like that. And, I'm an entrepreneur. No.
Yeah. And I don't want to be an entrepreneur. Like my plan for growth isn't to build something and sell it and scale it. Like I'm very happy here. I've built a very like a life that I'm enthusiastic about, with people that I really love working with. And there's really nothing better than doing what you love with the people you work with. And there's a recent book. I'm reading a book right now, but the audio version. Principles by Ray Dalio. Are you familiar?
No, I'm writing that down. Ray Dalio.
Yeah, it's pretty good. So I'm still in like the first third of the book where he's explaining his history, but the takeaway for me was like his intentional plan was to, as he grew his business, was to do it with people that he wanted to work with. So that way when there were like challenging situations, like everybody was like, okay, let's do this for one another. Let's conquer this together. And that's also something I've tried to infuse into growth. I do see like 5 years from now or less, this kind of DNA being really hard to keep together. I'm finding it easier now than it was at 3 employees or 5 employees. So like at this like 12 level, I feel really good about it. Maybe 12 to 20 good about it. But I wonder what the switch is going to be where it feels like culture, responsiveness, teamwork starts to become like a proper challenge, and we need to like have someone in a role of cheerleader or whatever the company culture role is.
It's gonna be when we get there, it's gonna be different in a few different ways. I've been in organizations that are 30, 50, 100 and more employees. Each does bring its own set of challenges, and I think one where I see success for you and for growth is you've established this DNA since day one, and it's everybody is bought into that culture, so it should continue throughout the rest. But I see like once we get to the 30 plus mark, you're right, there's gonna have to be a cheerleader that keeps it on point.
Yeah. Maybe I take that job instead, and we get a real CEO. Man, it's going to be exciting to see. I'm really enthusiastic. Like, it's been a lot of for us to grow. It has taken a lot of change. It has taken a lot of conversations, a lot of experimentation, a lot of putting our thoughts and conversations and making them very public, which allows people to share their opinions.
Mm-hmm.
But it has this whole experience of recording, sharing, enabled me to have a headspace of self-improvement that feels a lot more genuine. And even within a few weeks, I can look back and see ways that I approach things in similar fashion to how Peter Caputo was mentioning, using podcasts and these recordings as a way to practice how he presents information. I'm finding myself to really appreciate this growth experiment in real time as well. I feel like I'm speaking better overall, and my thoughts are a little bit more rational and packaged than
Well,
earlier parts of my career.
We crossed the first hurdle of 10 episodes. Go back now and listen to number 1 and just see the difference from number 1 to number 10. I think we're at 12 now as of today. And what I notice is the micro changes between episodes now. Like, you go back from 1 to 10, big difference. And then even now, micro changes happening each episode. It's the same thing. It gives me a chance to sit here and think. And you've given me a floor to stand on and say, hey, this is what I think, which I think even prior, like me running my own agency at that time, I didn't even have a podium to stand on. I didn't give myself that. So this has been an interesting experiment from this end too.
Yeah, man, I know you have led, but your leadership journey is very important to me. And I don't know everything. I wouldn't even say I know how to lead, but I'm certainly more aware now. And just like I was explaining the captain coach thing where you have to like do in real time, by helping you, I feel like I am getting better, and I am more aware of the kinks in my armor by finding yours and helping support those, as well as highlighting what you're already great at. I am an optimist, but I do tend to speak more to the things that need to change than I do the things that are already working. I've noticed that through the recordings. You have a lot of potential, and it's already obvious because you've already grown and you've already seeing Lucas and Rick work with you. And then, for everybody else, we have this an intern at Growth who is a friend of another one of our employees. He's Brazilian, finishing school in the U.S. And it's just like a very hard place for someone to be. Like, you're a human of two countries, basically, without like a lot of support on either side. So we rolled this into an internship, and of course we found some issues, but a lot of it seemed to like really stem from like personal confidence. Like, he hadn't worked in this capacity before. And then there was, whether it's a cultural difference or whatever, the idea of like truly showing up as yourself and like falling forward was kind of hard for him to grasp. But now that we're a couple of months in and we did his like 90-day or internship 2 review, there is an intrinsic difference into who he knows he is today than he did 3 months ago. He is a more confident, arguably happier person. having that support, and you did that. That's, to me, that at the end of the day, like all dollars aside, that is love, helping people live a better, happier life.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I wish that you could just tie that into ABM somehow, or complex websites, or HubSpot implementation, or Salesforce migration. Do it with a smile.
There's some ways. Well, we're coming up on that time. I have one thing, and I need to know the answer to this. So, my wife is almost a decade younger than me. She doesn't remember the original Star Wars. She grew up during the prequels, and I just had to ask you this because it's the time. Who shot first?
Oh, Han shot first.
Thank you. We were in this argument the other night.
Oh, that's because they changed the changed it,
back,
didn't they?
Back in the late 90s, early 2000s, they edited it out.
Oh yeah,
and you can't
Han
find
was like,
that version. Yeah,
really?
So, yeah, you can't find that version anymore. That actually has. I mean, there's like a clip somewhere, but if you go into like the Lucasfilm archives, it doesn't exist there. People are like, it's a Mandela effect thing. Anyways,
dang.
Conversation.
My wife, someone's got to have like the old VHSs or something to like. We need to get really dirty on it. Like, let's order one of those things on eBay.
A New Hope on VHS, but I need to find a VCR to play it.
Man, hit your local thrift store. But yeah, Han definitely shot first. He does not play around. He is just finger on the trigger.
Yeah, he's a nerfer.
Man. We all know that. A tale as old as time.
Question. Now to wrap it up, we haven't asked this question in a while. What's the last song you played on Spotify?
Let's find out. Please don't be weird. Please don't be weird. Okay. Not super weird. It is Nipsey Hussle, Grinding All My Life.
Okay.
I went for a run this morning. What about you? What's on your Spotify?
Let's see. Go Rest High on That Mountain by Vince Gill. I don't know. I left my Spotify on the other night and went to bed, and it just kept playing all this random stuff. So,
oh my God.
Who knows?
That's too funny.
Yeah. There's the new AI DJ. I don't know if you've played with that at all, but yeah. It's kind of cool.
I might mess with it. I appreciate spending time with you on here, man.
Yeah.
There's much to be gained.